Looks good.
Yeah. Right, good start.
It just, checking in after last weekend was an interesting one. Penn State's a good hockey team, and it's a tough building to play in. Their fans are right on. They've got a really neat student section, and the guys kind of sit right on you. And it was an interesting 2 games. It was odd in the sense that Friday night was a 7-2 game, and then Saturday was a 3-2 shootout win. And there was a lot of things, believe it or not, on Friday, I think, that we probably did better than we did on Saturday night. But what it's always come back to with our group of guys is that the determination and the commitment in blocking shots and the physicality of our play, which just leads to better hockey for us, was much better on Saturday night. And it was very similar in that sense to the Wisconsin series from Friday to Saturday night. Technically not doing a lot of things wrong, but having that commitment, that little extra energy and focus to get things done. So again, I came away real impressed with our guys that bounced back. Lethemon had a tough start on Friday. He's been outstanding for us. He was best player on the ice on Saturday night. We kind of needed him to be, and but that kind of mirrored the rest of the team. Everybody else, found it somewhere inside them to come back and play a heck of a hockey game, and that's for us is real positive. Keep taking points out of every weekend if we can, and at some point, get over the top in the Big Ten, and then we'll get a sweep, and we'll feel real good about it. But the guys keep moving forward. The belief is really, really strong with them, and you know what? They get better after they have a bad game. That's a good sign. So a lot of positives for us, and back at work this week, and we've got Notre Dame this weekend, which will be a heck of a test. They've won 9 in a row, and they're a good hockey team. So looking forward to it.
Damon, 2 questions for you. The first, Dan, I'm sorry, I was thinking about soccer. Dan, but one of the players told me after the weekend that Friday night when you walked into the locker room, it was a, quote, intellectual ass-chewing question. He said he'd never had his ass chewed without an F-bomb like that before. And I'm just curious, and he said that when you walked out of the locker room, they were disappointed in themselves. They weren't mad at you. That's a new side of you. Can you talk about that side? And maybe I've never heard of an intellectual ass-chewing before.
Well, I guess that's a nice way of putting it. We haven't had many occasions where we've been stern with them, and I think you always have to gauge where your team's at. If you've got a really good team that is older and a ton of talent, or if it's a pro team that's been around a while, or with the U.S. team who was an 18-year-old in the second half of the second year, you can get into them a little bit. When you have a team that's struggled last year, and then this year, we're certainly not over the hump. I think you have to watch, how hard you get after them. You have to pick your spots, and Dave Tippett, he's coached for a long time. He'll be back coaching the NHL at some point. He's used to talk about you get 3 shots in him a year to really get after him. So, there were some things that disappointed us on Friday night, and I think from the mental side of it. And so, we talked about some of those things. I probably went a little longer and maybe a little more animated than I've been with them to date. But I also think they're at the point where they can start handling that, where they know that they can do some of the things. So if you ask them things that they can't do or they can't achieve, then that's just the definition of frustration, because then you're asking them to get outside of what they're able to do. If you're asking them things that they've done and they know they can do, then I think we're within our wheelhouse and we're okay with that. So that was a challenge, and then you take your 4 or 5 minutes with them, and then start building them up back after that. And then we had a great meeting on Saturday and did some good video, and the guys, they were able to do it. And like I said, they're a gutsy bunch.
And finally with Lewandowski, obviously righty-lefty's different, and he's younger, but do you see some Peter Klima in him, just a little bit of ability?
Well, I played with Peter. Some of the things I hope he doesn't have, but he's slippery. The commonalities that I see that the puck comes off his stick very similarly. He finds holes real well. He's faster than you think he is. He's probably our best forechecker, either he or Taro probably. But his puck pursuit, he's not our biggest guy. He probably finishes more checks especially on the other side of the red line. So he's just a good hockey player, and he does, people, oh, he's scoring and he's doing this, and then you go, well, watch his game, watch the little guy finish checks, watch him, go into hard areas, watch him one-time the puck. Yeah, he's doing a lot of those things, and Peter was an exceptional player. I mean, he's a 30-goal scorer every year, but I think there's some of those aspects to him that are there.
Dan, I would assume some of that chewing on Friday night had to do with what happened in the face-off dot, 43-22. Then the next night you turn it around and win the face-off dot, 38-37. Can you talk about how important that was on night 2? And 32 block shots.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the commitment to hockey, and the face-offs. We can get into the centers on it, but it's not up to them, to win every draw. They're about half our wins are centers alone, the other half are the wingers and the defensemen jumping and being face-off ready. And Penn State, we knew going in, and we're going to see that again this weekend with Notre Dame. They're going to be ready and they're going to be jumping, and if you're not, you're going to lose a lot of those draws. And probably the thing that ticked me off the most, because the second was, and then once the game gets out of hand, the other team doesn't maybe play as hard, so you're going to accomplish a little more in the second period. And I didn't think the third was bad, but the thing that really ticked me off, and I'm an old centerman, so I always take this personally, and then as a coach, if you're not prepared, then that ticks me off as well. The last goal they scored was a face-off goal. We didn't stay in coverage. It wasn't it was a nice play by them, give them credit, but it was something that our center didn't stay with our center. Our winger lost his guy, and then the D on the backside didn't help. And so for me, that's a reflection on the mentality of where we were at, and that kind of summed it up. And that probably lit my fuse more than anything. Was just mentally that was a challenge we had. We always want to win the third period, and we've talked about it. I don't care if we're up 10-1, down 10-1, and when we're tied, it's obvious. But you want to win that third period from a psychological, from a physiological aspect moving forward. So. Yeah, we had to be better, and the guys were. Centers were better, the wingers were jumping, and D were prepared.
Dan, you talked about before about coaching, or actually playing for Jeff Jackson when he was coaching youth hockey in Detroit. Does this seem weird now that you're at college level to be facing him as a guy who once taught you the game? And also, what was your association with him as a player and him as a coach? Yeah,
I played my sophomore year of high school, played midget major for him down in Detroit, and then he moved on to junior team in Fraser, so my junior year of high school I played for him as well. And he was, believe it or not, he's only, I know you can pass this on to him, he looks a lot older than me, he's only like 10 or 12 years older than I am, but he was outstanding. I was lucky. I had him, and then got to move into Coach Mason after that. So 6 out of those 7 years from my sophomore in high school to into college, got to play with guys that were really prepared. He understood the game. He had a lot of people around him that came and helped at practices. He taught you how to play the game, play the right way, and that hasn't changed with him. He's just gotten better. So my interaction with him was real good. I think we think along the same lines. I think my approach to the game is in terms of how you prepare and the intensity and the focus that a team has to have and the way the team plays is very similar. And I was that way as a player, so I love playing for him. And he was a hard guy to play for because things had to be done right. So I appreciated that. We played him before. I've lined up against him before in college hockey, so that was real weird. Anytime you have somebody that you played for and now you're coaching against them, kind of used to it now. But the challenge of where they're at as a team and where he's at a coach, you always want to beat guys, especially if they're your friends and guys you have a good relationship. That's a competitor in all this. You want to beat them and you want to do well, and it's just like being a player. You want to compete, and it'll be a good competition this weekend.
Notre Dame has a very reputation of being a defensive team, and are they as defensive-minded as the reputation, or are they a little
I always think sometimes those things, and I went through it as a player with New Jersey where they talked about that, and I always thought it was always off. It was like, well, if the other team tries really hard and plays defense and contests the puck for 200 feet, well, then you're just defensive. Well, no, you're just hard to play against. And I don't think you have to give up. In New Jersey, we average 5 goals a game in the playoffs, and everyone's, oh, you're defensive. I say, well, I mean, that's a lot of goals to score every game. And I'm looking at Notre Dame, and I see them roll up, 5 goals on Saturday night. They can win 1-0, or they can score 5 or 6 if they have to. And that's the sign of a pretty good hockey team. They can play about any way. But yeah, are they committed to defense? Absolutely. Just like all good teams are. So I always take that with a grain of salt. And I always look at it, and it impresses me more when I can watch a team and say, good teams are easy to scout. You watch them, they do this, they do this, they do this, and they do it all the time. They do it really well. And bad teams are hard because you have no idea what they're doing. Notre Dame's a good team, and they're going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to make it hard on us.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on something you said earlier about 3 times a year making it after a team and trying to measure this team.
I break that rule all the time. I've never been able to accomplish that.
The fact that you have gotten something out of every weekend, and how much has that accelerated confidence with this group that they're able to walk away with something?
Well, yeah, anytime, we've talked about that a lot with the group. Competency, breeds confidence. Like if you start doing things well, you get something out of it. And if you actually do things well and get some small victories, psychologically, there's tons of studies on that. Or if you want to break a habit or start a new habit, you have to have some little victories along the way. And I think, we've been able to have some of those, every weekend come out of something. And really, other than the Minnesota weekend, and there was way more positives in that weekend. I had to put my tap dancing shoes on a little bit on Monday to make the guys believe that there was a lot of really good stuff that happened. Like that was a weekend that we could have and just didn't get over the hump and got something out of it. But every Monday we've had something to build on, whether it was coming back from Friday and getting a win against Wisconsin, a 2-0 win. That's easy to identify. Getting that win against Penn State, that was a pretty tough accomplishment for the guys. So they should get confidence out of that. They should start to hold themselves accountable, hold each other accountable, and that's when really good things happen. So we've talked a lot on these Tuesdays about that process, and you have to go through it, and they have to go through these experiences, and they have to learn how to win games and how to bounce back. And now what we really need to do is, let's figure out how to play 6 really good periods of hockey. That's kind of our next challenge, and not have a period lapse or not have a bad start, and give up 2 goals in the first minute and things like that. So. But again, you have to go through it, and experience is a heck of a teacher, and we've seen a lot of different situations so far, and it helps us.
How would you evaluate the performances of Lewandowski and Miller so far up to this point in the season? And why did you kind of decide to go with Lewandowski and Miller early on in the season with the top lines?
Yeah, I'd assess them outstanding. Tommy Miller played over 30 minutes on the game on Saturday night, and that's an 18-year-old freshman defenseman. That is, that's an amazing thing, and I knew he played a lot. And I kind of looked at Lou with, raised eyebrow after I was looking at the times. Well, that's a lot of ice time. But you know what? He's a mature young man. He's jumped in. He's serious about it. He continues to get better every week. So when we looked at our group, we put him with Carson early on, and we said, hey, you can learn a lot from a senior. They've clicked real well, and he's jumped right in. So he's, players decide ice time, and he's made us play him. And then, with Lewandowski, we knew we were going to have 1 or 2 freshmen probably playing our top 6, and he had the skill set that we could try him with Taro and Patrick. And the first day, I think anybody could have seen, even somebody who doesn't know anything about hockey, if you'd have seen those 3 play together, the chemistry they had and how they moved, you'd have been crazy not to leave them together. And then things go right. And, sometimes being smart is just not doing anything, so we've kind of left them alone. But I'd probably be lying if I said I thought he'd be where he's at. He's put up big numbers. He's been very impactful, responsibly defensively. We have him out 30 seconds to go in a game on Saturday night. He's out there. And if we could have got him out there earlier with the 1-goal lead, he'd have been out there. So no, they've been outstanding, and we've needed them. Thank God they've had a great start to their careers.
Dan, the football rivalry between Michigan State and Notre Dame has often been called a rivalry of respect. Do you sense a similar dynamic with the hockey rivalry between Michigan State and Notre Dame?
I think so. I think Jeff and I have, obviously, we talked about earlier, a long-standing relationship. It goes back, now, I hate to say it, 35 years now. But I also think, Jeff's Michigan State grad. I think you look back at, even the CCHA days back, in the early 80s when Notre Dame was playing, that's a big series. And I think it carries over from football. Like there's a definite carryover there. So, you know what, we need to get better to make it a really good rivalry, but I see something that's where it'll be. I certainly look at it that way. I know Jeff does. So, yeah, that's where we want to be. We want to be at that level that it's contested and it's personal. That's when you have a good rivalry.
Thanks, everybody.